Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. It's Tuesday, time to check out some new releases that are coming out this Friday, August 15th. It's about 400 albums coming out this week. I got 14 on my list for today. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. Like I said in the intro, there's about 400 albums that are coming out this week. I'm only going to talk about 14 on the show today. So if there's something you're looking forward to that I'll have on here, make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing. And like always, if you're unable to find these in your local brick and mortar stores, they should all be available online. I'll put links down below in the comment section for them. You can also always go over to the Vinyl Den store on Amazon. All the pre-orders are on there. There's new releases. There's deals on records. All sorts of cool stuff. Check out. For me, the big release this week is easy. It's the new release from Rise Against. This is Ricochet. It's their 10th studio album. So a few different versions of this are going to be available. There's a red version that's available. There's a standard black one. There's an orange version. And then the Amazon exclusive is on yellow vinyl, which also comes with a bonus 7-inch with 2 live tracks on it. But the Amazon version, I don't think is actually going to be released until early September. The standard version of it's going to run you about $24. The Amazon exclusive with that bonus 7-inch is going to run you about $30. This is their follow-up album to Nowhere Generation, which came out in 2021, which I know was kind of mixed, as far as reaction was from fans. I really love the album. I put that up as probably one of their, I at least put that up, maybe not as their best album, but I put it up probably towards the top. I think it's definitely in the top half of their albums. For the new album, they brought in Catherine Marks to produce, so it's going to have a little bit more of a different sound than what they've done over the last decade and a half in their career. There's only the second album since Siren Song and Counterculture came out back in 2004 that it wasn't produced by Bill Stevenson. Over the last probably 5 or 6 years, Rise Against has slowly turned into one of my favorite bands, so it's definitely an album I'm looking forward to. The singles that they released off of this one, I wasn't a huge fan of them when they first came out, but they've definitely grown on me over the last month or so. I do have the Amazon exclusive version of this on pre-order because I want to have that bonus 7-inch. But since it's not going to be out until September, I probably will end up grabbing a different copy of it this week. Actually, now that I think about it, there was an orange copy or a translucent orange copy that was through, I think it was Revolver. So I think it was Revolver that has the translucent orange one. So I guess I do have 2 copies of this on pre-order. Like I said, it's definitely not an album I'm really looking forward to checking out this week. And then we've also got the reissue of Balance by Van Halen coming out this week. This is the big, deluxe edition of this album. It came out back in 1995. It was their 10th studio album. It's the 30th anniversary release of this. So there's 2 different versions of this going to be available this week. The standard 2 LP version, it's going to run you about $34. And then there's a 2 LP, 2 CD, 1 Blu-ray. It's going to run you about $86. This, of course, was the last album in the Van Hagar era. So this was newly remastered back in 2023. So that's what's going to be in this release. This is a 2 LP release. It's got a D-side etching, so the music's only 3 sides of the 4. So the big difference between what's on this album, or this version of this, and really any album since it was first released in 1995 is the 2 LP version of this release this week has Blue Ethereum on there, which was not available on any of the releases since it was first released back in 1995. It was an instrumental track. It's always been cut because of time constraints. When the Van Hagar box set came out a year or 2 back, it wasn't on the version on that album either. So if you want that instrumental track, which I can do without it, I'm good with the version I've got in the box set, but that is going to be an extra thing that's going to be included on this release. So what you're getting in the big deluxe edition of this album is you're getting the album on CD and on vinyl. Then there's also an additional CD with B-sides. Then there's also unreleased live performances from Wembley Stadium in June of 95. And then there's also a Blu-ray with promotional videos and live videos on there also. I know there's a lot of people out there that love Balance. I've never been a huge fan of it. Like I said, I'm just going to stick with the version I've got in the box set. We'll see, maybe eventually if reviews are a lot more positive of this one than that version of it, maybe I'll end up grabbing a copy of it eventually. But, I'm probably just going to stick with the one I've got. There's also the big anniversary edition of No Need to Argue by the Cranberries coming out this week. Released back in 1994. It was their 2nd studio album. 2 LP release. This is the 30th anniversary. The 30th anniversary was technically last year, but whatever. There was delays to record production and things like that. So it's coming out this week. It's going to run about $37. This is all newly remixed and remastered by Stephen Street, who produced the album originally. It also includes 3 tracks from the Woodstock performance from 1994 and a never before released version or demo of the song Zombie. This is a massive album when it was released. It's going to sell over 17 million copies worldwide. I think this album is kind of widely seen as one of the better albums of the middle part of the 90s. I've never been a huge fan of the Cranberries. For the most part, I think I'm good with a greatest hits compilation from them, but I do love this album. I have this one on CD. I probably will grab a copy of this one this week also. Then you also get the new album from Tuttle coming out this week. This is So Long Little Miss Sunshine. It's her 5th studio album. It's going to run about $25. So Molly's played on a bunch of bluegrass bands over the years. She didn't release her first solo album until 2019. And since then, she's become more and more popular. She released City of Gold back in 2023. It hit #1 on the Billboard Bluegrass charts. I think it's kind of widely seen as one of the better bluegrass albums of the 2020s. I expect her new album to be just as good. I'm not a huge bluegrass fan, but it's another one I'll at least stream and check it out this week. There's also a 30th anniversary edition of Dreaming of You by Selena coming out this week. Released back in 1995, it was her 5th and final studio album. 2 LP release. There's a black version of this. There's also a beige Amazon exclusive. I think the Amazon exclusive has glitter with it, though, that's in it. I've had issues with some of those glitter albums before. I can think of Starcatcher by Greta Van Fleet came out a couple years ago, and you could kind of hear the glitter that was in it. So I'm interested to see what kind of reviews say about the quality of this pressing. But it's going to run about $38. So this album was released about 3.5 months after her death in March 1995. It would debut at #1 on the Billboard 200, which would be the first album ever to do that from a Latin artist. She got more popular here in the U.S. with the release of Amor Prohibido, which came out a year or 2 before this album. But then after her death and the release of this album, it absolutely blew up. 5 of the 6 singles that came off this album all received heavy airplay here in the U.S. And like I said, even though she had some success before, she went into the stratosphere with this album. Just really unfortunate that she wasn't around to see it. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that say, that you've never even heard a Selena song, but I can guarantee that if you're around in the middle part of the 90s, you probably know at least 1 or 2 songs off this album. It was just a massive release when it came out. So then you got that coming out this week. Then you also got Hit Me Hard and Soft by Billie Eilish. This was released last year. It was her 3rd studio album. As a 1-year anniversary edition of this album. I typically don't talk about 1-year anniversary albums, but I've got a reason for this one. It's going to run you about $30, but when this album came out last year, there was a lot of sound issues with the vinyl version of this album. There's a lot of complaints. I thought it was a good album, but I never picked it up because of all the complaints that the people had about the sound quality of it, how horrible it sounded, and I think a lot of people attribute it to being on bio vinyl or recycled vinyl. So I don't think there's anything different about the album that came out last year and this 1-year anniversary edition, other than this is going to be on blue and orange splatter vinyl. I'm interested to see the sound quality, the reviews and the sound quality of this album, though, because I hope it's better than the one that came out last year, because I'd love to have a copy of this album. I just didn't want to buy a copy of it and have it sound like trash. So hopefully they've improved the process, and this one sounds better, and I can grab a copy of it. There's also 3 Billy Idol albums that are getting reissued this week. The first one is Don't Stop, came out back in 1981. It was his debut EP. So there's 2 versions of this. There's a standard black version. There's also a version that's going to be on yellow vinyl. It's going to be about $28. So this was Billy's first release after leaving Generation X, and there's only 4 tracks on this EP, but those 4 tracks I think would really lay the foundation for what he would do on his next several albums. It does include a remixed version of Dancing With Myself, which was released a year before Generation X, but it didn't really go anywhere commercially. He would release it on this EP and it would become a hit for him. I've been a huge Billy Idol fan, since I was a little kid. I do have a copy of this in my record collection. It's not the greatest looking version of it. It's got some scratches on there. I actually have all 3 of the Billy Idol albums are coming out this week. I've already got all 3 of them on pre-order. But that was definitely one I was really looking forward to when I saw those pre-orders go up. So you got that coming out. You've also got Whiplash Smile. Came out back in 1986. It was his 3rd studio album. So there's a black version of this. There's also an orange version. It's going to about $30. So Billy's first couple of albums have been reissued over the last couple of years. I know they did the big anniversary edition of Rebel Yell a year or 2 back. So it really didn't surprise me that they were going to start reissuing more of his albums, because this album has not been available on vinyl since there was like a limited version of this, a limited run of it, and I think it was 2013. It was a UK pressing, but before that I want to say it was like 1988 or 1989 since it's been pressed. And the album did pretty well commercially. I think it hit number 6 on the Billboard 200. It got a lot of really mixed reviews. It had a little bit of a different style to it. A little more like that mid-80s kind of sound. Billie, I mean, it's still very close to what he'd done on his first couple of albums, but you could tell with this album that Billie was kind of trying to evolve and do something a little different. It did work on some songs, didn't work on others. It's not his best album, but it's definitely one I'm looking forward to getting this week. And then the third and final Billie Idol album. This is probably the one I was most excited for when this was announced. Has not been available in a very long time. This is Charmed Life. Came out back in 1990. It was his fourth studio album. So this is a 2 LP release. So this is the only one of the 3 that's on 2 LPs. So there's a black version. There's also a lavender daydream version, which is just like a lavender looking color. It's kind of like looks like it's lavender and maybe with a little gray splatter in there. It's running about $33. This is an album that, even though it was really successful and has been a very popular album for a very long time, this has not been pressed on vinyl since 1990. The album not only included the big hit single Cradle of Love, which was featured in The Adventures of Ford Fairlane with Andrew Dice Clay, it also has a great cover version of L.A. Woman on it also. And this is a little bit more like a straightforward kind of rock album from Billy Idol. By the time 1990 rolled around, rock music was going in a different direction. He left behind a lot of that like electronic synth kind of stuff that he'd done earlier in his career, and just focus on doing a straightforward rock album. And I think it ended up being one of his better albums. And it's an album that's eluded me for a very long time, so I was very happy to see this get reissued this week. Then you've also got E.L.O.'s Out of the Blue coming out. Released back in 1977, it was their 7th studio album. It's a 2 LP release. It's going to be on yellow and red vinyl. It's going about $34. This was easily E.L.O.'s biggest selling album of all time. Hit number 4 on the Billboard 200. It would go on to sell over 10 million copies worldwide. I've never been a big fan of that like orchestral rock kind of style that E.L.O. had, but I can at least appreciate the influence that this album had. This was a hugely influential album, especially artists in the late 70s and early 80s. I know even Axl Rose has listed this as one of his favorite albums of all time. And I remember when VH1 did their list of the best double albums of all time, I want to say this was like number 23 or 24 on that list. It's something I haven't listened to in a long time. I definitely need to revisit it. A couple of great jazz albums are getting released this week. Both are part of the Blue Note Classic series, which, these are always mastered by Kevin Gray from the original analog tapes. They're pressed to optimal. Both going to run you about $28. The Classic series does a great job because they go back and find these albums that have not been available in a long time, pull them out, and do great sounding versions or pressings of these albums at a really affordable price. Especially when you consider if you want to buy original pressings of these albums, you're going to spend a whole lot more than that $28. But the first one on the list is The Procrastinator by Lee Morgan. Came out back in 1978, but it was actually recorded between 1967 and 1969. And this album was released about 6 years after Lee's death, but it was recorded during a very classic period in his career. And I think it was 3 different recording sessions that he recorded this album over, and he was joined by an all-star lineup on here. He's got Wayne Shorter, Bobby Hutcherson, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Billy Higgins on drums. And it would go on to be the last album that Lee would record with Wayne Shorter, who had spent almost a decade together recording some truly classic albums. I've got a lot of stuff on pre-order this week, so this is one that I will grab a copy of this one, but it might take me a week or two to grab a copy of it. And then the second jazz album you got is Wayne Shorter, The Soothsayer. Came out back in 1979, but it was recorded back in 1965. It's all the same stuff. It's mastered by Kevin Gray from the original analog tapes. It's going to run you about $28. And The Soothsayer was recorded about 2 months after he recorded what I think is his masterpiece, Speak No Evil. I think it's kind of a shame that this album wasn't released in 65 when it was recorded because, it was almost 15 years later this album came out, and I would look at this album, if this came out in 65 or 66, I think it's probably, I think it would be widely seen as one of the better albums from that time period. I think Wayne Shorter is one of those jazz musicians that you really can't go wrong with anything he recorded. He's joined by a great lineup on this album. He's got Freddie Hubbard on here. He's got James Spaulding, McCoy Tyner, Ron Carter, the great Tony Williams on drums. It's another album that I probably will end up grabbing. It might take me a couple weeks though. And then rounding out the list this week, I got the first 2 albums from Coldplay getting reissued. The first one was Parachutes, came out back in 2000. It was their debut studio album. It's going to be on clear vinyl. It's going to run about $29. So Coldplay has become a pretty polarizing band. I think they're kind of widely seen as, I don't know if they're like as hated as, say, Nickelback and Creed, but I think a lot of people look at the band like that, but their first 2 albums I think are both classics. So what's coming out this week actually is more than just their first 2 albums. I think the entire discography from Coldplay is getting reissued. And what's special about these albums is they're all being released as eco records, so they're all injection molded. So it's a little bit different process than what you get with a standard album that's pressed. It's supposed to be a lot more environmentally friendly. My big question is always with products like this, that's all good, just as long as we're not sacrificing the quality of the music. I've got a copy of this on vinyl, so I probably won't grab a copy of it this week, but I'm interested to read the reviews. and see how these things sound. As far as early 2000s rock goes, this album was one of those albums that kind of helped spur on that Britpop revival in the early 2000s. I don't think it's the band's best album, but I think it's a lot better than a lot of people at least give it credit for being. So you got that coming out this week. You've also got A Rush of Blood to the Head. Came out back in 2002. It was their second studio album. Same thing. It's going to be on clear vinyl. It's got that eco vinyl. It's going to run about $30. So by the time they got to this album, they were a little more experimental with this one. It's a little more of a dynamic album. I think this is easily the band's best album. They would go on to be nominated for Album of the Year, the Grammys that year. It would hit number 5 on the Billboard 200. It would sell over 10 million copies worldwide. It was a huge album when it came out. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing this week. Like I said, I've already got a lot of stuff on pre-order. I got 2 copies of that Rise Against album on pre-order. Like I said, that Amazon exclusive, I don't think it's coming out until September, though. I've got all 3 of those Billie albums on pre-order. I might grab that Selena album. I might grab 1 or 2 of those jazz albums also. Lots of good stuff coming out this week. But let me know what you guys are looking forward to. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.